So a couple things about me that maybe you can relate to. I don't particularly like to be told what to do. I think all of us have that in us when we're young, and then I realize that I still haven't outgrown that. I don't like to be told that I have to do something, even if it was my idea, then I might like it, but when somebody tells me I have to do it, then even if it would have been a good idea if it was my idea, when somebody tells me I have to do it, I don't want to do it, and I know that's immature. I tend to think that my way of doing things is better than other people's way of doing things, even if it's something I've never done, which creates problems sometimes with my family. And I think it's because I'm human. Do we have any other humans in the room? Any other humans in the room? Yeah, you can relate to some of that. I don't know what this is, but this has always been a problem. I don't like to read instructions, which means oftentimes I have to do things twice, assuming I can undo the fact that I did it wrong the first time. I don't know if you've ever had to do that. It's why I can't cook. Sandra tells me all the time, if you can read instructions, you can cook. I'm like, I know, that's why I can't cook, because I just can't seem to follow instructions. When we got engaged, we heard that we should go through premarital counseling. And I'll just be honest, my first response to premarital counseling is, so another guy, because it was always men back then, another guy is gonna tell me how to run our relationship. That was my first thought. And then I thought, marriage, how hard could that be, right? But we did go through premarital counseling, and I'm so glad that we did. And Sandra is really, really, really glad that we did. And that leads us to our series. Today we are in part 2 of a series entitled, "You'll Be Glad You Did, Timeless Advice for Troubled Times." We have all lived long enough, right? We've all lived long enough to reap the benefits of some good decisions we've made, to reap the benefits of some good habits we've developed, and we've also lived long enough to experience the consequences of bad decisions and bad habits. Every single one of us, this isn't a religious thing or a Christian thing, this is just a human thing, right? We all have stories that end with, "I'm glad I did." Unfortunately, we have stories that end with, "I wish I had," stories that end with, "I'm glad I didn't," and stories that end with, "I wish I hadn't." So in this series, if you're just joining us, in this series, I'm offering unoriginal, you'll be glad you did advice. These are not moral or ethical imperatives. These are not commands. These aren't rules. But this is advice that will but this is advice that, but if you take this advice, it will all but ensure that you don't break the rules that have the potential to break you, or the potential to break your heart, or the potential to break the heart of someone that you care about. And in session 5, I'm gonna give you some advice that will actually keep you from going broke. Now, this advice, like all the advice you give, because all of us have given someone advice through the years, and all of us will continue to give advice. This advice is like the advice that you give, in that it sits between the rules. Again, this isn't right versus wrong, legal versus illegal, moral versus immoral. All of this advice sits in the realm of wisdom. And the working definition for wisdom that we're using in this series is simply insights informed by the knowledge that life is connected. The insights informed by the knowledge that life is connected. By life is connected, that means that one thing leads to another, that today's decisions become tomorrow's consequences or tomorrow's rewards, that the decisions, and this is huge depending on how old you are, that the decisions that we make in one season of life have the potential to shape the next season of life, and you can't go back and live a season. So the decisions we make, they follow us throughout our lives, and there's a sense in which, our decisions are the steering wheel of our life. So life being connected, this is something we all discover at some point along the way. It's the thing that we want our kids to understand, right? That the past is gonna show up in the future. So my unoriginal, you'll be glad you did advice for this week is one word, and it's the word listen, which is really odd advice to give a group of people sitting quietly in rows facing forward, I realize. And I also understand that without some context, this could actually be bad advice or not always good advice. But if we're honest, and we're mature enough to follow this, if we're honest, nobody really ever has to tell us to listen to information or tell us to listen to advice that we already want to hear, right? I mean, nobody has to say, listen, this is important when it's something we want to hear anyway. How many times do I have to tell you, order dessert, okay? Said no one, all right? No one's ever given you this advice. Or look, you need to buy those shoes, call him back. You need to move in, buy, lease the car, charge it, hide it, excuse it. Don't apologize, don't ever apologize, right? The advice that we want to hear, the things that kind of feed an appetite, those things, nobody has to tell us. Confirmation bias is strong in all of us. Nobody has to tell us to listen to what we want to hear or, again, take advice that feeds any one of our multiple appetites. But it's pausing, it's unfolding our arms and agreeing to listen to what we don't want to hear. That's the challenge, and that's what today is about. And that, if I can just be honest, that's actually maturity. That being able to uncross your arms and listen to what you don't want to hear when you don't want to hear it actually puts you ahead of most people. It puts you ahead of the pack. It will keep you out of trouble. It will pretty much ensure that you will write a story that you won't be embarrassed to tell, a story that you're proud to tell. But it's not natural, is it? Natural is, tell me what I want to hear. Tell me what I want to hear. Or if you're not going to tell me what I want to hear, then just don't tell me anything at all. Now, if you lose track or you decide not to watch the rest of this message or you get distracted, what I'm about to say next, this is a big takeaway. It's not the biggest takeaway, but it's something I hope you'll never, ever forget. And maybe the way I say it is a little clunky, but you'll get the idea. Refusing to listen to what we don't want to hear that we need to hear is a gateway decision. Refusing to listen to what we don't want to hear that we need to hear is a gateway decision. Let me explain what I mean by a gateway decision. The worst thing you've ever done in your life is not listen. But perhaps the worst thing you've done in your life was the result of refusing to listen. Your greatest regret in life isn't that you didn't listen, but perhaps your greatest regret, or perhaps many of your regrets, stem from the fact that somebody tried to tell you something and you didn't listen. Refusing to listen when we need to listen, refusing to hear what we don't want to hear when we need to hear it is a gateway decision. Again, as we said last time, all of your greatest regrets are preceded by a series of unwise decisions. All of your greatest regrets are preceded by a series of unwise decisions. And refusing to listen when we need to listen, to hear what we don't want to hear when we need to hear it, is an unwise decision, and it sets you up and it sets me up for regret. Now, I notice no one's writing any of this down, and you don't need to write any of this down because we already know, we have one wonderful note taker on the front row, which I just love that. I'm such a note taker, or grocery list. It doesn't matter. Make me, feed my ego. Anyway, we don't need to write any of this down because we already know this. And the reason we know everything I've said so far is true is because we've been on the other side of this. Every single one of us has watched a friend, a family member, someone we care about at work. We've watched them begin to make bad decisions, and we've tried to get in front of them and kind of head them off at the pass. And, it was just so obvious to us, don't go out with him. Don't go out with her. I'm just telling, don't take that job. Really, I don't think you should take that trip. Don't call him. Don't call her back. And from our perspective, it is so obvious what they should or shouldn't do. Because from the outside looking in, it's just so clear. I mean, every single person listening, whether you're watching online at any of our Atlanta area churches, here with me, every single one of us can think back maybe in the not too distant past where we tried to talk somebody out of something, and it was so obvious to us that they shouldn't do what they were about to do, or that they needed to do something they didn't want to do. I mean, it could not have been any clearer. In fact, all of their friend group, anybody that knew about the situation is like, they're gonna do what? It was so clear to everybody but them, which is the point. Because to the people on the outside of you and the outside of me looking in, it's so clear. And if I will pause, and if I'll be humble enough to listen, and if I'll uncross my arms, in my experience, I'm always glad I did. In your experience, you're probably always glad you did as well. And if you're in that tension right now, in fact, the person who's been trying to get your attention about something, they're sitting next to you on the couch, they're in the room with you, they're in the van with you, they're sitting in church somewhere with you, and they're trying to keep their elbows in, and, because we've all been on the other side of that. And maybe you're on the receiving end of that, or you need to be on the receiving end of that. And there's everything in you, because it's in me too, that just doesn't want to listen. So when you hear yourself saying, or you catch yourself thinking, or you hear yourself humming, I don't need you to worry for me, because I'm all right. And I don't need you to tell me it's time to come home. I don't care what you say anymore. This is my life. Go ahead with your own life. Let's just finish it together. Go ahead with your own life and what? Leave me alone. Yeah, leave me alone, right? When you find yourself thinking that, humming that, you catch yourself going, that's the time to tap the brakes, not hit the gas. Now, some of you are thinking, Andy, who told you? Who told you? But nobody told me, didn't have to tell me. This is so common to all of us. But perhaps, again, your spouse, a best friend, a neighbor, somebody who loves you, maybe one of your children has been trying to get your attention about something. So just uncross your arms, keep your mouth shut for a moment, and just listen. They may see something you can't see. They may have a perspective that you lack. You may be so wrapped up, and this is all of us. You may be so wrapped up in an appetite, in the emotions generated by that appetite, you really genuinely can't see straight or think straight, and you need to listen. And while you're listening, without interrupting and with your arms uncrossed, you need to pay attention to the tension. In other words, while you're listening, you need to ask yourself the question, and this is hard for us. Okay, Andy, what's really going on here? What's the real issue here? Why are you being so stubborn? Why are you so offended? Why are you so emotional? Why is this getting you so churned up? Andy, what is this really all about? Why are you pushing back so hard? Because in that moment, that advice, regardless of who it comes from, may rescue you from yet another regret. Now, King David, we're pretty much all familiar with King David. King David was the second ancient king of Israel. And when King David died, his son Solomon took the throne. And when Solomon took the throne, became the king of Israel, he was about 20 years old. Frontal lobe development was still a few years off. And now he's the king of Israel. Just think about that, but don't think about it too much. Now, the good thing about Solomon in those early years, this is so interesting, he was wise enough to recognize and humble enough to admit that he didn't know what he was doing. And this is difficult for anybody, but it's especially difficult for young men, right? He was wise enough to recognize and humble enough to admit that he didn't know what he was doing and he needed help. And his biographer actually documents a prayer that he prayed that I think is an extraordinary model prayer for anybody who's trying to get the listen to what we don't want to hear when we don't want to hear it thing right. Here's what Solomon prayed. He said, now, Lord my God, you have made your servant, talking about himself, king in the place of my father David, but I am only a little child. I can't even wear his clothes. I look kind of crazy sitting on his throne. What am I doing in this position? And I don't know how to carry out my duties. This is a great start. This is the right posture. This is the posture we should try to maintain throughout our lives in just about every single role we fill, regardless of our experience and regardless of our age. And then here's his request. Listen to this. This is so powerful. This would be a great prayer to incorporate into your prayer life. So give your servant a discerning heart. In other words, help me to see through the things that are difficult to see through so I can arrive at the right decisions. Help me to see between the gaps. Help me to see around the rules so that I can understand how the world works and how to decide. Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to be able to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? Who knows how to parent a middle schooler? Who knows how to parent a high school student? Who knows how to raise a child? Who knows how to lead a company? Who knows how to be a good husband or a good wife? You just pick the role, you just pick the arena, and you open up your heart and your arms, you say, God, I really don't know what I'm doing. I've got some success, but hey, I've never been in this season of life before. Just give me discernment. Give me the ability to discern between right and wrong in this season of my life. And here's the result of that prayer. Some of you know this story. And God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. There's something going on here I don't want you to miss before we continue. Okay, this is really important, okay? You know that water follows the path of least resistance, right? that water follows the path of least resistance, wisdom does as well. Wisdom does as well. And humility creates receptivity, which results in wisdom. That's why the moment, I don't care what it is, who's saying it, the moment we immediately begin to resist before we listen, we are no longer receptive. And wisdom follows the path of least resistance, and pride is the resistance. And here's the outcome of his story. And his fame spread to all the surrounding nations. The text tells us, his biographer tells us, that kings and queens and dignitaries came from all over that region of the world to sit at Solomon's feet and just listen to his wisdom. Now, with that as a backdrop, this is fascinating and I think a bit surprising. The man, Solomon, who apparently needed no one's advice, wrote more about seeking advice and refusing not to listen to advice than any other ancient author and any biblical author. The guy who didn't need anyone's advice because he was so inherently wise and had this extraordinary supernatural insight, the guy that never needed advice wrote more about taking advice and refusing, the consequences of refusing to take advice than any other ancient writer and any biblical author. So I'm gonna give you a few samples of what Solomon said and make a few comments along the way. Then I'm gonna give you some practical steps at the end. Here's a good one. Instruct the wise and they will be wiser still. Implication, nobody is ever so wise that they don't need outside counsel or advice. No one is ever so wise or gets to the place where they're so wise or so smart that they can't benefit from input from the outside. Here's another one. A wise person will hear and increase in learning. And a person of understanding, this is so powerful, will acquire, that is, seek out wise counsel. Wise people don't resist counsel. Wise people don't wait for counsel. Wise people actually seek it out. They acquire it from the outside. They don't wait to be told, and they don't have to be sold. They don't wait to be told, and they don't have to be sold. In other words, they don't wait for somebody to come to them. They look for opportunities to throw open the door of their life, and in some cases, the door of their heart, and invite people in to say, hey, I need outside counsel. I need input. Now, here's an observation. And for some of you, perhaps this is the point of sitting through this talk. When we don't want it, okay? When we don't want it, it's when we need it. Let me put it a different way. Do you know how to know when you need outside input? When you don't want it. The moment you realize, I don't want to hear what she has to say, is the moment you need to realize you need to hear what she has to say. The moment you think, I don't want to hear it, is the moment you need to hear it. The way that you know, I mean, this is so clear, right? The way that we know that we need advice, the way that we know that we need wise counsel, is the moment we find ourselves resisting it is an indication that we need it. With that in mind, here's what else Solomon says. He says, the way of a fool, this is harsh. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes. Look, I got this figured out. I got it. I have figured this out all by myself. I see so clearly that I don't need the input of anyone else who's looking. I can see this so clearly, even though I'm kind of in my own head, caught up in my own emotions, my appetites are enraged, but hey, you know what? I see so clearly I don't need any outside counsel. And Solomon says, well, then you're fooling yourself, which makes you a fool. You are about to make a decision that assumes life is not connected, that what you do today is not going to impact tomorrow, or you are blind to the fact of how it's going to impact tomorrow. But there's somebody out there somewhere that can connect these dots for you. But a fool is right in his own eyes, but a person who listens to advice is wise. Did I mention when we don't want it is when we need it? When we don't want it is when we need it. So let me meddle just a little bit more and we'll move on. What do you intend to do that you don't intend to share because you don't want to hear? Right now in your life. What do you intend to do that you don't intend to share because you don't want to hear? Because we've all been there. You already know what he is going to say. You already know what she is going to say. What are you planning to do right now? It could be financial, it could be relational, it could be academic, it could be, I don't know. What are you planning to do right now? And you've already decided, I'm not sharing this with him, I'm not sharing this with her, I'm not sharing this with anybody because you don't want to hear what they have to say. Can I just look up here a second? If I could just look into the crystal ball of your life, which I can't, but I can read the future, your future for you. If you have already made up your mind and you don't want to share because you don't want to hear, you are masterminding a regret. You are right now on the front end, masterminding a regret. You are manufacturing, you have taken responsibility for your own regret because you refuse to share and you refuse to hear and you refuse to listen. And if there's something in you that doesn't want to share because you don't want to hear, that's the indicator that you need to listen. You are in the process, and it's not too late to turn back. That's what the good news is. You are creating, you are manufacturing, you are the mastermind behind a future regret. We'll move on. Plans fail. You've probably heard this one before. Plans fail for a lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Here's another one. Listen to advice. This one's kind of harsh too. This is where we really push back. Listen to advice and accept discipline. Accept it when somebody says, that's a bad idea. Be open to pushback. Be open to correction. You know, I kind of put it out there. I knew you were going to say that, but I thought I'd put it out there and let you say it anyway because I want to understand why you're saying what you're saying. But look at the promise. Listen to advice and accept discipline. And at the end, you will be counted among the wise. And otherwise, this should kind of, at least appeal to your ego and your pride, if nothing else. In the end, you will look smarter than you actually are. You will look wiser than you actually are. Now, I just want to stop and talk about this one for a minute because this intersects my life in such a significant way. I caught on to this and began to embrace this many, many years ago, and I've benefited from this so much, and let me just tell you how you've benefited from it as well. In our organization, our network of campuses and churches and all the stuff that we do, we have a board that I answer to. They're my boss. They could meet this afternoon and fire me, and somebody come in here next week and say, Andy's gone, we fired him, and you don't get a vote, okay? My destiny sits with the hands of a handful of people, as it should, okay? So that's our elders. Then we also have another team of people, stewardship team of men and women who look at our organization just through the lens of finances. And then I have another team of people, our leadership team, our staff team. And then I have another leadership team that's a campus team. And whenever I talk to men and women about what I do, and leaders, how you always compare notes and how do you do this and how do you do that. Whenever I talk about our structure, 100% of the time, the immediate response is this: that is so many meetings. That's so many meetings. To which I say, no, that is so many wise men and women who have access to me to ensure that we guard the integrity of this organization. They make me look way better than I actually am. I'm like the hood ornament, okay? I say that all the time. I get so much credit for things that weren't my idea. In fact, I get credit for other people's good ideas, and fortunately, they talk me out of my bad ideas, and I've had some really bad ideas through the years. But I've learned to listen because selfishly, it makes me a better person. It makes me a better leader. It makes me look far more competent than I actually am. And this is the promise Solomon is making, that when we open ourselves up, whether it's in our marriage, our relationships, our entertainment, our money, just any arena of life, we are going to make better decisions. We are going to have to say no to ourselves in the moment. But it allows us to experience freedom in the future because life is connected. And none of us are smart enough, wise enough, or have had enough experience in life to play it, to be kind of the Lone Ranger individuals that just do whatever they want to do and make the decisions without input from anybody else. Solomon, the wisest man in the world says, that's foolish. Now, when I was younger, as a young leader, I had a false assumption about a lot of things, and especially leadership. I just assumed that great leaders, like the great leaders that you see, leaders in industry or nonprofit leaders, whatever it might be, I just assumed that they gave advice They didn't seek advice. They didn't take it or seek it because I just assumed they didn't need it. I mean, look at them go. I mean, they're just so brilliant. They're so smart. They make all the right calls. I mean, they're just amazing. But like many of you, as I've had opportunity to meet some extraordinary people who've accomplished some extraordinary things, I found just the opposite to be true. In fact, I've been with people who are far more accomplished than me, who ask me so many questions, I had a hard time getting my questions in. And I remember walking away thinking, this man, this woman is a lifelong learner. People would die to have 10 minutes of their time, and they're still learning, they're still asking, they're still curious, because they knew that leaders who refuse to listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing helpful to say. Leaders who refuse to listen, eventually you're gonna be surrounded by people who have nothing helpful to say. Leaders who won't listen, I mean, you know this, right? Leaders who won't listen, they push the smart, talented, mature people away. And what's true in leadership and what's true in organizational leadership is true for your family, it's true for my family. It's true in your academic life, like it was true in my academic life. It's true in every arena of life. That when we refuse to listen, or when we develop the reputation of you can't tell him anything, you can't tell her anything. And by the way, you'll never know that's your reputation. No one's ever, rarely is somebody gonna say, well, every once in a while, they're not gonna say, can't tell you anything. And when they say you can't tell you anything, you're gonna say, yeah, exactly, because I already knew it, right? But you've said that about people, you've thought that about people. Don't waste your time on him. Don't waste your time on her. She can't listen. It's like they're not gonna, you're wasting your time. The moment you become that person, there is a lid on your progress, a lid on your growth, a lid on your relational maturity and your professional maturity, because you may accomplish great things, but you will never accomplish everything you could accomplish relationally or professionally unless you learn and I learn and we're willing to listen. Because the wisest man in the world said the wise person acquires, seeks out counsel and advice. So as we wrap up, I want to give you 4 quick tips about how to listen and who to listen to. Now, as you know, there is so much literature on this topic. So this is not exhaustive by any measure, but I just want to give you 4 kind of quick statements that have helped me, and maybe these are the things that I bump into so that I just need to keep front and center. But here's 4 quick statements, and we'll put these on our social media sites in case you didn't have a chance to write them down. But you got them. Or you can come down to the front afterwards. Now, we got all the note takers down here, which I love. Okay, the first one is this, all right? This first one's a little clunky. Avoid the genetic fallacy, to which, what is that? Okay, the genetic fallacy is discounting information based on the source of the information rather than the merits of the information. We all do this. In other words, it's discounting information. It's like, well, what does she know? Oh, look at her kids. Oh, look at his kids. Are you kidding? I mean, his finances are so messed up. I'm not taking his finance. I mean, look at their lives. They couldn't possibly have anything good or helpful to say. That's a fallacy. To just kind of state it bluntly, bad people can still give good advice. Bad people, unsuccessful people can give good advice. People who have never done what you're trying to do can still give you advice that will make you better at what you were attempting to do. Now, I tell you the group that, and if you're not a Christian or a religious person, if you just not listen to this next part, that would help me tremendously, because I wasn't sure if I should say this, but I'm gonna say it. So if you're not a Christian, just, don't listen to this. Us Christians, we should be the best at this. You know why? Okay, because in churches all over the world every Sunday, we incorporate the writings and the lyrics and the text of a man who basically forced himself on a woman, then got her pregnant, had her husband, who was his loyal servant, murdered, and then married her and covered the whole thing. He wrote a lot of the lyrics that are in our worship songs. Is that a little cringy? Yeah. Yeah, it's like, you read the Psalms. It's like, if you're a Christian, you read the Psalms. This is so comforting. Do you know who wrote that? Do you know what he did? And it's like, yeah, but that's different. Exactly, it's different. And the same is true, again, we, of all people, we should have the grace and the openness to receive information, helpful information from just about any sort, because we're the people who worship a God of grace. In other words, another way of saying it is don't buy the lie of cancel culture. And, everybody's talking about cancel culture, but my synopsis of cancel culture is this: the cancel culture lowers the IQ of the entire culture. Or to put it a different way, if you were in this moment to forget everything you've learned from imperfect people, you would forget everything you know, including your name. Let me say that again. If you suddenly forgot everything you've learned or been taught by imperfect people, you would forget everything you know, including your name. So don't fall for the genetic fallacy, okay? Just because the source isn't someone you trust or even respect, don't discount what they say, because there may be merit in it, and you're mature enough to know that. But again, this happens quickly. It's like, I can't listen to that. Look at the source. Don't fall for that. Number two, moving on. Number two, don't assume expertise in one area makes you an expert in every area. Don't assume expertise in one area makes you an expert in every area. This is kind of a guy thing, okay? Because I'm super successful here, I know everything there is to know about everything in every category, right? The more successful, success is intoxicating. It just is. Success is intoxicating. The more successful we are somewhere, the smarter we think we are everywhere. It's just how it works. I was a kid once, I know how to raise one. That doesn't apply to raising kids or surgery or dental work or a variety of things. I had surgery once, I can do this. No. You had one, you can't perform one, okay? So just because we have expertise in one area, it doesn't make us an expert in other areas. Again, this mitigates against our pride. This is an issue. That logic just doesn't hold up. Number three, don't confuse experience with insight. Okay? Don't confuse experience with insight. This is what we do. I have all this experience in my life, so therefore I have all the insight I need. I don't need to listen to anybody else. So we say things or we think things like this. Well, I wasn't born yesterday. We knew that. So this is not my first rodeo. That just means you're good at rodeos. Great. That's not what we're talking about, right? I've been around the block a time or two. That may just mean you're dizzy. I've been around the block time. That just means you're old, not necessarily wise. This is important. Listen, look up here. Experience does not make you wiser. Evaluated experience makes you wiser. Experience doesn't make you wiser. Experience just creates a rut, a habit. Experience doesn't make you wiser. Evaluated experience, that's what makes you wiser. And then number four, this is what we talked about last week, but this is worth repeating. Number four, listen for I know. Whether you're thinking it or you're saying it. We talked about it last time. Listen to yourself. When you catch yourself saying, I know, here's what you're saying. Shut up. Shut up. That's what you're saying. I know. But knowing doesn't equal doing, and knowing doesn't mean you will do, and you already know that. One doesn't necessarily translate to the other. And come on. Knowing without doing is worse than not knowing. Knowing without doing, just if I can leverage a biblical term, knowing without doing makes you a fool. Knowing without doing says, you know what, I know what I should do, and I know what the consequences might be if I don't, but I'm gonna do what I wanna do anyway. Proverbs says, Jesus says, that's a fool. Because the fool has said in his heart, life is not connected. There is no God. Everything about life is just random. So, wrapping up. At some point in all of our lives, we have said or thought, I should have listened, right? I should have listened. Refusing to listen is a gateway decision. It's not the worst thing you'll ever do, but it could lay the groundwork for the thing you regret for the rest of your life. It leads to regret. We've all thought or said this, I should have seen it coming. I should have seen that coming. Chances are someone else saw it coming. And they either tried to warn you or you had fended them off so many times before, they're like, there's no point in talking to her. No point in talking to him. Somebody could have seen it coming, or they would have seen it coming if you had invited them into the decision-making process with you. Because there are people who can see what I can't see. And there are people who can see what you can't see. And you are better off if you're able to see through their eyes, which means you got to uncross your arms, lay down the resistance, humble yourself, and listen. In the words of James, the brother of Jesus, be quick. Remember this? He said, be quick to listen, but not so quick to speak. And if that becomes the habit of your life, and if that becomes the habit of my life, if that becomes our habit, we will be glad we did. And the people we love the most will be glad we did as well. And we will pick it up right there next time in part 3 of You'll Be Glad You Did. Timeless advice for troubled times. Let's pray together. Father, it's easy to talk about, not so easy to do. So I pray first of all for the couple, engaged couple, married couple. And this is exactly what's going on. And she just can't hear. He just can't hear. And there's so much tension. Would you please give both people the grace to just uncross their arms, put down their defenses, and receive whatever it is that they need to receive. Father, wherever this strikes us, wherever we're resisting, just give us the wisdom. That's it, the wisdom to understand we don't lose by listening. To pay attention to that tension inside of us and to figure out what's really going on. And I pray, Father, that we as parents, as business leaders, as community leaders, wherever it is that we have influence, that we would be better because we listen. And I pray all of that in the matchless name of Jesus, our Lord and Savior.